Have you ever been accused of being something that you're not? Or better yet, being someone that you're not? There's a young lady that hangs out with our family a lot, and over the course of time, there have been different young people who've had kind of this same challenge, if you will. We know as a family that we kind of have an assignment on earth. And while we're not perfect people, we've strived very hard to maintain a certain level of attitude and excellence and professionalism, regardless of where we are or what we're doing. And it does tend that people who are friends of my children kind of fall into that mode. We find that kids who are not comfortable with that standard of life and the pace at which we move and the things that we do and all of the activities that we're engaged in, they tend to fall to the side, or they don't hang around with us while we're doing those kind of things. And that's pretty typical. I think if you look at your family, whether you're a family with a whole lot of children or a family with a few children, you begin to see some similarities with your children when they're all together out in public doing what your family does, or with kids who hang out with your family. They all seem to move in a rhythm or a pace together. And the ones that don't really fit into that family, they don't behave the same way, converse the same way, treat each other the same way when they're together in public and doing their thing, they tend to not be in public doing their thing. Am I making any sense? So here's what real happened, and this has happened dozens of times. We'll be in public doing something. This weekend we were setting up and tearing down for DJ events and then recording in studio all day. And there's a young lady who hangs out. She's been seeing my son almost a year now. And so they're pretty serious in their relationship, and they kid each other around and you know, poke each other, tickle each other, do the kinds of things that you would do when you're in a familiar relationship like that. But she's recently lightened the color of her hair, so she's got a little bit of a red or a blonde tint to it. Well, she also has, for about the last year, spent a lot of weekends with us doing events where we're setting up and tearing down lighting equipment or video equipment or sound equipment. And so she's really accustomed to moving at that pace and showing up in the middle of the afternoon and working till the odd early hours of the morning and just working right into that pace. And I believe it was this weekend there were at least 4 different times that someone came up to her and said, "Wow, you guys are really good at what you do, and tell your dad good job." And she looks around because she's thinking, my dad's not here. My dad doesn't have anything to do with this. But the relationship that he's making is, well, she's too young to be in business on her own, so she must be here with the parent, and the only parent that I see is that other blonde-headed guy over there, and they're all doing the same kind of work, and of course my boys are there. And so there's an instant connection that they say, you must belong to him because you live and move and do what he does. Now, she's not the first one who's been accused of that. On many occasions, young men and young women who've hung out with my kids who are doing the same thing, moving sound equipment, taking things down, setting things up, running cameras, are accused of being my kids because they're hanging out with my kids, they behave like my kids, and by that I mean when someone addresses them, they're respectful, they're professional, and if they're not, then they're not going to be hanging out with my kids at those events. I'm not going to take the chance of having someone with us in public who behaves entirely different. I don't want someone hanging out with them, and we've had some that just wasn't an environment for them. We love them, and we love them hanging out with our family, and we take them places with us, but in public at an event doing professional things, I can't risk our business reputation on the way they choose to behave. I hope you're getting the feel of what I'm talking about, because there are a lot of different circumstances where our behavior, our conversation, our choice of words, our choice of relational encounters, it demonstrates to the world who we are, who our Father is. Now, these young people often get mistaken for my children because they're with my children and acting like my children. And sometimes Christians have the same, advantage Or maybe it's a disadvantage. Maybe it's a privilege. Maybe it's an accusation. See, there are a lot of people who show up at church every Sunday, and there are a lot of people who go, oh, you're just like them. You're one of them because you look like them and you dress like them and you talk like them and you act like them, so you must be one of them. Peter had that problem. Peter was accused of being a disciple of Jesus. Remember that? Peter said, I'll never deny you, no matter what. But 3 times in less than 24 hours, he denied it. I don't know him. I don't know what you're talking about. Stop accusing me of that. It's common for these young people who get lumped into that relationship and go, oh, you must be his. You look just like your dad. And they go, but that's not my dad. And some of them just kind of swallow it eventually and start calling me dad. And they just say, and they go, you know, if they're going to call me your kid, I'm going to be guilty as charged, right? But can we do the same thing to be known as the children of God? How do we become a child of God? How do we become not just a labeled Christian, a religious folk, a churchgoer, a Jesus follower, but a child of God? Well, Ephesians 2, 9, and 10 tells us how to be saved. Through faith. Because of grace. There's nothing we can do. And now you're thinking, well, if it's grace that saves us, who cares how we behave in public? See, that's really what happens. There's this, I believe the right word is inculcation. And by that I mean there's this environment that we get surrounded in, this atmosphere that changes us. Now, you heard me say just a minute ago that those young people who hang out with my kids, who don't fit the mold, they don't fit the process, they don't have the level of excellence, they don't have the right attitude, they don't have the way of addressing the would-be customer. They're simply not asked to be with us in public at those type of events because the way we treat others is so important in our business and professional relationships. What that means is that atmosphere proves out their nature, their character, their relationship, their level of relationship for me. Young people who come with my kids to do an event or come meet my kids at an event and begin to hang out with us, if they don't have a level of honor for me, for my business, for my clients, that's at the highest level, they won't be asked to be in that environment again. Because that environment is so crucial that that level of honor be there. And young people who dishonor me won't be invited to come back to that space again. That's a pretty big deal. Now, there are those who feel like I can live any life that I want to and come to church on Sunday and we're all good. I can call myself a Christian because the label Christian is wide open. It's for anybody. And actually, that's true. If my dog could speak, he could call himself a Christian. Because Christian was simply a label that was put on the people at the Church of Antioch, the first church. They got called Christians because they were Christ followers. But there's a different thing here. They were recognized because of their affiliations. They were recognized because of where they hung out. But what made them true followers was that they were saved by grace through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast. It wasn't what they did that made them believers, that made them children of God. Being a believer, acting like the believers, hanging out with the believers, was all evidence after the fact. What made them a child of God was surrendering to the call of God. What made them a child of God was that they claimed the name. They said, I am one of his. And in so doing, a transformation began to take place in them. The want to do the right thing, the desire for righteousness, the slavery to righteousness doesn't hear the voice of sin. That doesn't mean that humans who are children of God don't make mistakes. Of course they do. And so long as we live in this fallen world, the temptations to do that are tremendous. And the work of the enemy to cause us to sin, to fall away, to deny God, to do inappropriate things is at a heightened level When the enemy realizes he's lost another disciple to the Father God, that a child has returned home, that his heart has been given over to God, and Satan just ratchets up all of the temptations and all of the wickedness and all of the things that will come around you and the pressures that come around your life. They're going to get harder and harder. When these young people work in this environment with us, when they're seen in public with us, when they're working on the job with us or working in the studio with us, and someone accuses them of being my child, right? Hey, I love the way you guys work. Your dad must be proud. There's an instant sense of, okay, wait, that's not my dad, but he just said he's proud of the way that I work. These people just told me that I'm good at what I do. And so there's a little bit of a challenge to continue to do well. There's an encouragement to continue to do well. There's a reason to continue to do well, to do the right things, to live in righteousness. Because they've now been noticed for those things. 1 John chapter 3. It says, what a marvelous love the Father has extended to us. Just look at it. We are called children of God. That's who we really are. That's also why the world doesn't recognize us or take us seriously, because it has no idea who he is or what he's up to. But friends, that's exactly who we are, children of God. And that's only the beginning. Who knows how we'll end up? What we know is that when Christ is openly revealed, we'll see him. And in seeing him, we'll become like him. Think about just that single verse for a moment. In seeing him, we'll become like him. By modeling him, by just the observation of the glory of Christ, his lordship in our life begins to take over and transform us into something entirely different. Just being in his presence, just seeing him for who he really is, will change us. All of us who look forward to his coming stay ready, with the glistening purity of Jesus as a life model for our own. All who indulge in sinful life are dangerously lawless, for sin is a major disruption of God's order. Surely you know that Christ showed up in order to get rid of sin. There is no sin in him, and sin is not part of his program. No one who lives deeply in Christ makes a practice of sin. None of us who do practice sin have taken a good look at Christ. They've gotten it all backwards. So my dear children, don't let anyone direct you from the truth. It is the person who acts right who is right. Just as we see it lived out in our own righteous Messiah, those who make a practice of sin are straight from the devil, the pioneer in the practice of sin. The Son of God entered the scene to abolish the devil's ways. People conceived and brought into life by God don't make a practice of sin. How could they? God's seed is deep within them, making them who they are. It's not in the nature of the God-begotten to practice and parade sin. Here's how you can tell the difference between God's children and the devil's children. The one who won't practice righteousness and righteous ways isn't from God, nor is the one who won't love brother or sister. It's a simple test. The greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and the second one is like it. Love your neighbor. Those who claim to be children of God and harbor hatred for their neighbor rather than love, who speak and do evil things, those who won't acknowledge that there is a God who is also a king and therefore his decrees and his mandates are absolute, those who want to rearrange the Bible to suit their lifestyle, those who want to rearrange Christianity so that the label fits whatever they choose, those are not children of God. Because the seed of righteousness that's born in one who's born again demands of them from the inside out that they change. It transforms their very nature. And because that seed is deep within them, the way they behave isn't a way of behaving that's modifying who they are. It's the other way around. Who they are is modifying the way they behave. If one of these young people that hangs out with my family were to marry one of my children, they would be, by marriage, grafted in to our family. At that moment, they actually would become children of mine. I haven't raised them, though. I am not fully responsible for every decision they make, but my influence in their life will be significantly greater when they're grafted into my family through marriage. That's a big difference. I also know this, though, that when we marry, we take on a whole new nature. We're no longer just an individual. We're now part of a couple, part of a family unit that's starting on its own. It's a brand new seed to become a brand new thing. And we, as believers in Christ, are grafted into the family of the Hebrews, the family of Jesus and the Jews, the chosen people of God. We're grafted into that family when we're born again. And that causes a change in us. We're a brand new seed, a new creation. There's no condemnation for us. Again, it doesn't mean we don't make mistakes, but it does mean that our want to isn't driven by sin. Our want to is driven by the King. Are you a child of God? Are you a child of God because you say so and call yourself a Christian? Or are you a child of God because the Spirit of God is alive in you? And greater is he that's in you than he that's in this earth. Are you a child of God because the seed of God is in you and the evidence is in the fruit of your life? If you don't know the answer to that question, send me a private message. I would love to chat with you about that. What does it mean to be a child of God? It means to have the Spirit of God alive in you, to be surrendered to the King, to live by faith, and to let your life demonstrate that the fruit of the Spirit is alive in you. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, meekness, and self-control. For those of us who are born as children of the King, all the rights and privileges of being in the family of God, to be a child of God, are yours. Use them. Use that power and authority to do right in the world, to lead others to know him and to glorify his name. I'm J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.